Tonight, a massive multi-state emergency as Irma's wrath rolls up the eastern seaboard. A new flood disaster ongoing from Jacksonville to Charleston. And in Florida, over 7 million without power. Many could be knocked out for weeks. Tonight, our first look at the scope of devastation in the Keys as the state, dependent on tourism, races to get damaged airports back open. Bannon unleashed in his first major interview. The ex-Trump aide unloads, raising eyebrows with what he says was maybe the biggest political mistake in modern history. Massive breach fallout affecting nearly every family in America. Tonight, the steps to take now to protect your identity and your credit for years to come. And a somber day of remembrance, 16 years after 9/11. Nightly News begins right now.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from Sarasota, Florida.
Good evening. All of Florida and now beyond is dealing with the aftermath of what was Hurricane Irma. Tonight, there are unlikely stories of communities spared at the last minute as others faced unexpected peril during Irma's march up the state. At least 2 people have died since Irma's U.S. landfall yesterday, and right now over 7 million customers are without power. Tonight, U.S. Navy warships are joining search and rescue operations in the hard-hit Florida Keys, while floodwaters have inundated parts of Jacksonville in the northern part of the state. And now Georgia and South Carolina are also feeling what's left of Irma's wrath. Our team remains fanned out across the hurricane zone. We want to start with NBC News meteorologist Dylan Dreyer.
Tonight, a weakened but still destructive Irma continues wreaking havoc in the southeast. Strong winds and heavy rain bringing unprecedented flooding to Jacksonville today.
It's a little stunning, you know, it's jaw-dropping.
As water rushes into the streets, now unrecognizable.
This is potentially a week-long event with water and the tides coming and going.
City officials are warning residents to evacuate if they haven't already.
Put a white flag or something that represents a white flag if we need to get you out.
Rescue teams ready to deploy, focusing on areas around the St. Johns River, which runs south to north. That means all the rain that fell south of Jacksonville was pushed up by the winds. It's the ultimate trifecta for historic flooding here. More than 10 inches of rain, a record-breaking storm surge, and these strong winds have been pushing even more water into the St. Johns River. Florida felt the brunt of Irma's wrath yesterday with torrential rain and punishing winds. More than 7 million in Florida lost power, one of the largest weather-related outages in U.S. history. That could last for weeks.
It is a magnitude that we just haven't seen before.
Throughout the state, people are beginning to pick up the pieces from the storm. At least 200,000 Floridians were crammed into more than 500 emergency shelters, many returning home.
This is the first time in 70 years that I have that something like that happen.
In Miami today, standstill traffic. Emergency crews were also out assessing the damage. In the Everglades, countless homes are underwater.
It was water coming through like the second floor. We had buckets picking up the water with, with towels, and it was pretty intense.
Today, hundreds surveyed the destruction in Naples, where widespread flooding is still an issue.
We've been through a couple hurricanes before, but nothing like this.
Now, the focus is turning to Georgia and South Carolina, where in Charleston,
this is what we came home to.
Rescuers are already going door to door in neighborhoods ravaged by the storm.
Now, it's a slow process, but this water will continue to recede as Irma pulls away. Let's take a look at the latest. It is a tropical storm right now, but it will weaken to a depression tomorrow, bringing a few inches of rain and much less wind to parts of the south. Lester?
Dylan Dreyer, thank you. Tonight, we're getting our first broad look at the massive devastation of the Florida Keys, walloped by a direct hit from Irma as a Category 4 hurricane. The military has now been called in to help with relief efforts, as many places are still very difficult to reach and the death toll is still unclear. Our national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is there.
This is one of our very first looks at some of the damage, and it really does stretch Neighborhood to neighborhood, homes in the water, boats in the water.
Tonight, this is the way in to the hardest hit islands in the Keys. Irma's path of destruction, obliterating homes, swamping neighborhoods, and likely taking lives.
It looked like a nuclear bomb went off.
Brian Holly rode out the storm, among the 10,000 who refused to leave.
It's gonna take months, maybe years, to get this cleaned up.
Irma made landfall here Sunday, her eyes swirling right across the Keys, packing 130-mile-per-hour winds, waves up to 15 feet high.
With such widespread damage below, some of the Keys are only accessible by air. There's so much debris in the ocean, even reaching this location by boat can be dangerous.
Tonight, the National Guard deploying search and rescue missions into the Keys. Local officials say a humanitarian crisis is looming in the lower islands. Big Pine and Cudjoe Keys among those hardest hit. No water, no food, no phones.
There's a lot of shenanigans going on.
They need fresh water, they need gas. Mostly they just need manpower to get clear passage through their yards.
It's not just homes damaged across the Keys. So is vital infrastructure, roads and bridges. Repairs could take weeks, even months.
Irma hitting with fury, and now it's left a sea of destruction.
Tonight, US 1, the iconic road to enter the Keys, is only open to emergency personnel. Water could be shut off the island for several days. Meantime, three U.S. Navy warships are positioned off-sea, prepared to offer search and rescue teams when needed. Lester?
All right, Miguel Almaguer, thank you. Throughout the state of Florida, from beach towns and hotels to theme parks and airports, the race is on to get a state so dependent on tourism back up and running. It's a deep economic impact in the tens of billions, and we get more on that end of the story from Miami International Airport and our business correspondent, Jolene Kent.
Tonight, the bill for Irma is adding up fast into the billions. Air travel is paralyzed. The skies over Florida empty. Miami International was hit with flooding, roof damage, some gates unusable.
You have some areas where you literally have a pond or a small lake. It's nothing that can't be fixed. It's just going to take some time, and, we have to work around it.
FlightAware says more than 14,000 flights have been canceled in Florida and the Caribbean in the last 12 days since Irma got moving. And today, she drenched Atlanta, turning the busiest airport in the world into a ghost town.
We're supposed to fly out today at 7:30, but it was canceled.
Nearby, in their operations center, Delta dispatchers work to get flights back in the air. Florida wants tourists to return quickly to the deserted beaches, up abandoned hotels, shops, and restaurants that power the economy. Insurance losses from Irma, including homes, businesses, and vehicles, are estimated to cost between $20 and $40 billion. Jim Durhan is picking up the pieces of a 65-room hotel in Fort Lauderdale.
It gets very emotional. I broke down a couple times. I've been doing this 17 years. Every day this area is closed, it's millions of dollars.
As evacuees return to assess the damage, a harsh reality. Only 42% of homes in Florida's coastal counties have flood insurance.
When something has a low probability of happening, people think it'll never happen. But if it rains where you live, it can flood where you live.
Florida is also the second largest produce grower in the U.S. The price of fresh fruits and vegetables could rise as the waters recede.
Here at Miami International Airport, these ticket counters are eerily quiet. Officials tell us this airport is slated to reopen sometime tomorrow afternoon. Fort Lauderdale is scheduled to reopen early tomorrow. Lester?
Jolene Kent in Miami, thanks. And before making landfall in Florida, Irma slashed through the Caribbean, devastating a number of islands, including the U.S. Virgin Islands. Relief is arriving to the region, but many there remain in desperate need of help. NBC's Ron Mott has more on that now from San Juan.
The usually lush green U.S. Virgin Islands are a lifeless, dull brown tonight, paradise torn apart by Irma. Many homes damaged or destroyed, looting and burglaries reported of American service members arriving to help clean up.
It's still a mess. Home invasions have been high, armed robbery. That's a big concern. Lots of people are walking around armed.
Brittany Gonzalez, who evacuated to Mississippi, worried about her husband still there.
It's not going to be the same St. John, and we don't know if it can even be our home again.
Further south on St. Martin, the hurricane is said to have destroyed more than 90% of the island. American medical student Mike Thrashavoulis shot this video of the damage where he lives. Cars tossed around the parking lot, finally able to leave on an American military plane. Tonight, he's in Puerto Rico.
There were plenty of times, that night and also throughout the week where I really wondered, geez, how is this going to end?
Now cruise ships are arriving to take others out. On Barbuda, nearly 100% destroyed, tour operator Craig Ryan ferrying people off the island. Families on nearby Antigua taking strangers into their homes.
These families have lost everything. You couldn't believe that there was a town there before. It's surreal.
Officials say reconstruction in Barbuda alone could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Billionaire Richard Branson today posting these images of destruction at his island home. Branson already helping with the relief effort. San Juan is playing a key role tonight in the recovery efforts in the Virgin Islands. The airport here is open, supplies are being flown in and then ferried on a daily basis by the U.S. Coast Guard and others. Lester?
All right, Ron Mott tonight. Thank you, Ron. As President Trump monitors Irma's path of destruction, his former chief strategist Steve Bannon is busy making headlines of his own. In a rare interview, Bannon sounded off on what he calls the president's biggest mistake and declared war on the GOP establishment. Let's get more from NBC News Chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson.
Steve Bannon moving from the shadows to the spotlight, with the White House fielding a flurry of questions about the former chief strategist.
Anything beyond Steve Bannon.
The topic of Steve Bannon.
We may be answering more questions on Steve Bannon.
It comes after the controversial advisor's first interview since resigning with 60 Minutes. Bannon blasting the president's decision to fire former FBI Director James Comey.
If James Comey had not been fired, we would not have a special counsel.
You described the firing of James Comey. You're a student of history as the biggest mistake in political history.
That would probably be too bombastic even for me, but maybe modern political history.
The firing of James Comey was the biggest mistake in modern political history.
If you're saying that that's associated with me, then I'll leave it at that.
Today, the White House responding.
The president was right in firing Director Comey.
Now, Bannon, back at Breitbart, is threatening to boost primary challengers to some sitting Republicans, gearing up for what he calls war against the establishment.
The Republican establishment is trying to nullify the 2016 election.
The question now,
I'm a street fighter. That's what I am.
How far that fight will go. Hallie Jackson, NBC News, the White House.
As the emergency operations continue here in Florida, from New York to Washington to a field in western Pennsylvania, it was a somber day of remembrance. Hard to believe it's been 16 years since 9/11. Families once again gathering to mourn and make sure we never forget. Here's Stephanie Gosk.
16 years later, the names are read.
Ralph Gerhardt.
Robert Gerlich. Family and friends gather in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The military brass pay tribute outside the Pentagon.
We're gathered here
today. A New Yorker reflected for the first time as president.
The living, breathing soul of America wept with grief for every life taken on that day.
Even while coping with the hurricane's destruction, first responders stopped for a moment of silence in Puerto Rico and Miami. Across the country, the artifacts of the Twin Towers, shared with cities large and small, today have special meaning. From Grapevine, Texas, to Healdsburg, California, Freeport, Maine, to the tiny town of Rockville, Minnesota. While once again, courageous families reminded us of what they lost.
My father, Paul Dario Cirioli. Dad, this is Brady. He's your first grandson.
This year's anniversary, like those that came before it, making the same simple request. Never forget. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
We'll take a break here, and there is much more still ahead tonight on Irma's impact here in Florida. Also, growing outrage over the cyber attack that may have exposed every adult in America. The steps to protect yourself when we come back.
My friends think doing this at my age is scary. And I say, not if you protect yourself. What is scary? Pneumococcal pneumonia. It's a serious disease. My doctor said the risk is greater. Now that I'm over 50! Yeah!
Just one dose of the Prevnar 13.